Argentine Mauser.
You guys worked out a good deal on this?
I need a wall hanging.
Okay. Well, there it is. There's money in the hand there. And there's a gun in the hand. This might cause all security and safety in America to disappear. Good Lord. We stand, America. Thank you, gentlemen. What are your names?
Jack Thompson. Rob Peterson.
Thank you, guys. And we're not just doing this today. We will ignore this legislation because it is not law. It is lawless. Is Mack up here? Okay. We got Mack on the way up, and he's going to talk to us. And
Can I squeeze through here?
it's important that we remember when we go home here. You know, we come out to these rallies and then we go home and we say, oh, well, okay, I went to the rally, but now I'm going to go ahead and sign up for that permit. I'm going to register that gun. I'm going to follow that law. Liberty is not easy, and it does not come free. And it has to be stood up for. And there is a risk, and we have to be willing to put ourselves on the line like everybody here is doing in standing up for this law. So I encourage you before you leave here today to invest yourself in liberty. To pass off that gun to your neighbor.
If you see Jeff.
To purchase or sell. And to let government know
Somewhere, I'm not sure. Okay.
that our rights are not to be touched. And that liberty stands. At this point, I'm just monologuing because I'm waiting for the speaker to show up. Here he comes. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is a man that should need no introduction. He came a long way to be with this group of patriots here today, and what a beautiful group of ragtag, liberty-loving patriots we are. Thank you for being here, and I'll let him introduce himself, Sheriff Richard Mack.
Hey, I came all the way from Arizona, and it's just not feeling too much like Arizona. So, if you could move in a little bit and let's warm me up a little bit, just move in. Everybody move in. Let's look like we're united, all right? Let's unite in the holy cause of liberty. Let's mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor to this holy cause. And move in here and let's be together. Let's let the media see that we are together. We are united. We are Americans. We are brothers and sisters. And we don't care what color we are, and we don't care what religion we are. We care that we believe in our Constitution and our foundation and in our founding fathers and the God in heaven.
That's right.
Okay? Now, before I get going, I've always gone to these events, and they've always bothered me. I've gone to these events in Bangor, Maine, and Syracuse, New York, and Maui, Hawaii. Really like those Maui ones, let me tell you. And they're a little bit warmer than here, but it's the same thing everywhere. They require you to get permits. And you know what? What are the first 5 principles of the First Amendment? They are freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, the right to peaceably assemble. You do not need a permit for that. And you didn't get a permit for this. Hallelujah! That is fantastic. You know when you hear that I've got my permit for the Second Amendment, for my guns, it's called the Second Amendment? He's got his permit to have this event. It's called the First Amendment. Okay? Now we just named 4 out of the First Amendment. We left off one. What was the other one? To file grievances against government. So we're doing all of those here. We're having freedom of speech. We prayed. We're having freedom of religion.
That's right.
We have the right to peaceably assemble. We've got the press here. And how free that is up to them. Yeah. All right, so we're exercising the First Amendment here in protection of the Second Amendment. And that's exactly how it goes, because they go hand in hand. It's not a cafeteria. You don't get to pick and choose which one we're going to keep. We're keeping them all. We're not here just for the Second Amendment. We're here for all of our rights. No exceptions, all the time, freedom, 10th Amendment, all the way down to the First Amendment, and first back up to the 10th. We're not making any exceptions for any of them. Our politicians have a hard time with the English language. So I'm really glad that Gavin read that part, because so many of the politicians, you know, you got to get the peanut butter out of their ears. Because when you say shall not be infringed, they don't hear that not part. They think it says shall be infringed. And that's why they continue to do this. Have they ever looked at world history? Have they ever looked at really the history of gun control throughout the world? Have they ever looked at that and seen what it does? Who's the greatest gun control fanatic in world history? Hitler. Why do our politicians in Washington emulate Adolf Hitler? And they think that there's no problem. Yeah. So I did a study. I did a book about that. I've written lots of books. And I wrote a book about that very issue. Because your politicians want you to believe that gun control is magic. And so I wrote a book called The Magic of Gun Control. And you see, why would it be magic? The only way that gun control could ever be magic is if it did something good. If it provided any benefit to any of you, even to your children. Now, I have 5 children, and we have 12 grandchildren. 12. You're supposed to say, I don't look that old. Thank you very much. But, my dear friends, the reason I came all the way from Arizona is because I love all of you, and I love my grandkids, and I love my country. So, the reason I came here was God, family, and country. And I'm going to tell you right now, I didn't have time to come here. I didn't. I went to Washington, D.C. on Monday. I got home yesterday afternoon. I changed clothes and shaved and went to Tucson to a meeting. That was 2 hours away from where I live. I drove back, got home at 10:30, packed for this trip, left this morning at 5 o'clock, and got here this afternoon. And then they called me from the church and reminded me that I have to teach Sunday school tomorrow. And Monday I'll be in Minnesota. And so we're keeping busy because you know why? The threat to our freedoms is so real. And this is the most crucial time in American history since the Civil War. And we are the generation to decide if we're going to remain a free constitutional republic or if we're going to succumb to political correctness and lose our way and lose our freedoms and lose our Constitution and lose our liberty and enslave ourselves and our children with this notion that somehow gun control will be magic if we try it in America. It will do something good for you, even though in world history it never has. If you want magic, the book says, if you want magic, go to Vegas or Disneyland. And you can see the illusions there, because that's what gun control is. It's a big, fat lie illusion. Now, some of you might not know, but the reason I'm here is because when I was sheriff, I'm not a sheriff anymore. I train and work with sheriffs all over the country. We had dozens of sheriffs that were in Washington, D.C. this week to oppose Obama's amnesty plan. And we were fighting that. And we let them know that the sheriffs aren't going to put up with this. Well, no sheriff, and there's lots of cops around here. Have you seen the cops walking around here? That's great. I'm glad they're here. No cop, no law enforcement officer, no peace officer, no sheriff should tolerate these laws at all and say we aren't going to allow them in our jurisdiction. Do you know that we actually have sheriffs in California doing that? We have sheriffs in New York fighting the SAFE Act and telling the governor there, we're not going to enforce it. That's what you need to do here in Washington. No sheriff, no peace officer, no chief of police, none of them should enforce this monstrosity and this constitutional abomination. No way. So, I did that when I was sheriff in 1994. I was the first sheriff in American history to sue the federal government to stop gun control. It was the Brady Bill. And you know that it actually worked. We took it all the way to the United States Supreme Court, and we won. I was all by myself. Nobody did it. The NRA, I called them and I said, hey, I want to sue on the Brady Bill. Can you give me some legal advice? And the attorney's name for the NRA was Richard Gardner. And he said, Sheriff, we've already been preparing the paperwork on this case. We've just been praying that a sheriff would call. You're him. I said, okay, it sounds like we're an answer to each other's prayer. So we did it. And 6 other sheriffs joined the lawsuit from all across the country. No one from Washington. No one from Oregon. No one from California. Nobody. There was a sheriff from Montana, Sheriff Prince, Sheriff Coob from Texas, Sheriff McGee from Mississippi, Sheriff Romero from Louisiana, Sheriff Frank from Vermont, and Sheriff Anders from Wyoming. 7 sheriffs out of 3,100 took on the federal government. And you know what? We sued the Clinton administration and lived to tell about it. And we stopped the Brady Bill movement. Did you know there was 5 Brady Bills scheduled? We stopped Brady Bills 2, 3, 4, and 5, or we wouldn't be having this rally today. And we would have to be really doing something to take back our Second Amendment, which would almost be impossible. And that's why you're here today, because you know and understand that. Once lost, taking them back is something we don't even want to think about. Because this movement right now, if you have sheriffs involved in it, will remain peaceful. Can you imagine that? You already know we're not going to comply with this, right? Right. We are not going to comply. Now, put your sheriff next to you in that civil disobedience. Do you feel the power of that? Do you see how protected you are? Do you see how we keep it peaceful? We can, and we must. And you've got to talk to your sheriff. And let me ask you this. That's why I wrote this book. It's for your sheriff and it's for every peace officer and elected official. On the front cover is a sheriff from Texas. It's a female sheriff. She's a lady. She's real young. She's a former Marine. And I was going to put myself on the front cover because, well, it's my book. I can put me on it if I want. But I fired me and I hired Sheriff Pamela Elliott of Edwards County, Texas. And she's a good friend and she's a good constitutional sheriff. And I wanted her on the front cover to answer the question and to take that pose that she has right there with Goliath coming up behind her. And the question in the book is the same. Are you a David? And you want to take this book to your sheriff and ask him, read the book. All I'm asking is to read the book. It only takes about an hour and a half. Read the book, and then I want you to answer the question, are you a David? Will you stand against Goliath? Do you have an obligation to stand against tyranny? Do you have an obligation to go along with our politicians when they answer the call to take the bribes and the payoffs from the federal government or from their donors in their campaigns, and then they pass laws because they've been paid to by corporations or friends or whoever has the money? And yet we believe that our Constitution has to count for something. And the story that that quote is in this book. That was Sheriff Nick Finch from Liberty County, Florida. Did you hear about him? He got arrested and booked into his own jail. And you know why he got arrested? He wasn't corrupt. He wasn't taking money. He was standing against the system. One of his deputies arrested a man for having a gun in his pocket, and he went to jail. And Sheriff Finch found out about it. And they said, "What do you do? What did you do here?" He says, "Well, he had a gun in his pocket, and he didn't have a concealed carry permit." And Sheriff Finch says, "We don't arrest law-abiding citizens for having guns in their pocket."
That's right.
And Sheriff Finch released the man, and he nullified the arrest. And the deputy went and told on him and told the state police, and they came in and arrested the sheriff. And the governor, Rick Scott, removed the sheriff from office, suspended him. He didn't have any money. He wasn't making any money. How's he going to defend himself? And then Willie Meggs, the prosecutor, came in and said, "Well, I can make this real easy on you. If you'll just leave office, we'll remove all the charges. We'll drop all the charges." They charged him with a felony. A sheriff for doing his job and keeping his oath. So we went out and we did a fundraiser for Sheriff Finch, and I went to the trial. The trial was Halloween Day last year, October 31st, 2013. And he refused to take the deal, and he told the stupid DA to pound sand. And this guy's a former Marine too, and he says, "I know how to fight, and I will fight."
Woo!
And so Sheriff Finch gets on the stand, and they start badgering him. "You think you're above the law. You don't think you have to go with the law." And he goes, "I think I have to go with my oath of office." And finally they kept after him and after him. And he says, "Well, you're not upholding the law of the state where it talks about having to have a concealed carry permit." And finally he just looked at the prosecutor in the eye, and he looked the jury in the eye, and he said, "The Constitution has to count for something."
That's right.
What a tremendous example.
That's right.
Every sheriff, every public official, every politician, you need to know the message from Sheriff Nick Finch. The Constitution has to count for something. And if you don't uphold and defend and protect and preserve the U.S. Constitution, then it counts for naught. It is nothing. You are destroying America. You are destroying our Constitution. You are destroying what made us great in the first place. How dare you? And then how dare any sheriff or cop say that they have to go along with that? You don't have to go along. He said, "Well, hey, I have to uphold the law." That's right, you do have to uphold the law. It's called the Constitution of the United States, and it's the Constitution of Washington. Now, one other book. I wrote all these, can you believe it? How did I have time to do that? But my first book was actually born out of my lawsuit against the Clinton administration. Oh, by the way, I really did a lot of work. You know, I used to be a detective, and I did a lot of investigation. And I looked at this very thoroughly. And I looked at all the people who had ever sued Bill Clinton, even way back when he was governor of Arkansas, and all the time he was president. I was the only one to ever sue Bill Clinton on a non-sexual matter. Yeah, can you imagine it was the other way? Yeah. Don't even think that. Okay. But I wrote this book because of that, and I just, this is how I felt about it, and I still do now. From my cold, dead fingers. Why America needs guns. And do you know why we need guns? There's a lot of different reasons, isn't there? And somebody, I saw some of you with guns. In fact, I see a lot of you with guns. And you know, government officials, in fact, Pierce Morgan, he was asking a lot of gun owners. He asked my good friend Larry Pratt, you know, "Why do you need that gun?" And anytime anybody asks you that question, everybody gives a different answer, but you know what my favorite answer is? None of your damn business why I have a gun. If they're from government, that's the answer. I'll have whatever gun I want. And Vice President Biden, he wants to tell my wife to have a shotgun and just to go start shooting off the balcony. What does he want my wife to do? To kill all the owls and doves and birds and stuff? What is he, crazy? So, yeah. But Vice President Biden, my wife doesn't like shotguns. She prefers the AR-15. Thank you very much. And she'll have it because she wants to.
That's right.
And in the book, I quote George Mason, and I think it's one of the best quotes about guns ever, about the Second Amendment, and why the founders developed it in the first place. I asked, sir, what is the militia? It is the whole body of the people.
Awesome.
Except for a few public officials. They didn't want politicians in the militia. They want to screw it up, you know? But then he said this: gun control is the best and most effectual way to enslave the people.
That's right.
Now do you politicians get it? Gun control equals slavery. We will not be slaves. We will not bow to you. And I know somebody touched on this earlier, but I want you to know, and this is in my books as well. What's the matter with background checks? I'll tell you what's the matter with them. Because you're giving authority to government they do not lawfully have. And for your government, I don't care if it's state level, county level, or whatever, the only way a background check before you can get a gun is lawful is if you voluntarily do it. If you don't want to do it, you don't have to. Why? Because you're not a criminal, you're an American, and you don't have to go through that because your government has no authority, no right, no power, no business ever saying to you, unless you submit and unless you subject yourself to my background check, you can't have your Second Amendment. That's not the way our government works. We don't need your permission. We don't need your permission to be here or to exercise our Second Amendment rights, but you need our permission to exist. And you got it all backwards. And these liars in our state capitals and in Washington, D.C. just don't get it. And we will not comply, we will not disarm, because we will not be slaves, and we will not subject ourselves to you in any way. So, now, there was another expert besides Adolf Hitler on gun control. His name was King George III. And King George! Yeah, we got a bunch of them now. And the founders finally fired the first shot. We don't know really who fired the first shot, but we know the first shot was fired there at Concord, Lexington. And it was all because King George III said, these colonists are starting to get on my nerves. And he was a young punk, but he knew the power of tyranny, and he also knew the power of taking guns away from the citizens. And so that's what they wanted to do, and they came in to confiscate the arsenal of the American people. And they said, nope, that's it. You're not taking our guns, because we have no recourse. In America, it was set up this way that we are in charge of government, and that we have the authority. What does the Declaration of Independence say? That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, what ends? Life, liberty, and property, or the pursuit of happiness, it is our job, it is our duty, it is our right to throw off such government and establish new guards. How could we ever do that if we were disarmed? We could never do it. So you don't disarm no matter what, and no matter how they paint this, you don't disarm. In my book, The Magic of Gun Control, has a chapter that says this: gun control in America is against the law. It's against the law, specifically against the law. And you know how long it would take you to find that out? Historically, research it. It would take a second grader maybe 5 minutes. Because it's there, it's bold, it's part of our history. And we have a lot of work to do, my dear friends. And I want you to know that there's something else that I'm going to do. And I don't want to do it. And my wife really doesn't want to do it. But there was a group of people that were looking for answers to what we're doing. And they formed a committee, and they formed a website, and they got together and they said, let's call this the Constitutional County Project. And we're going to try to make at least one county in America a complete and entire constitutional county. And now imagine that all of you and all of us that similarly live in Utah and Arizona, Colorado, all lived in the same place. Can you imagine that? And we are the town councils, and we are the county commissioners, and I am moving there to run for sheriff. Look this up. constitutionalcountyproject.org. This group got together and came to me. I wasn't part of it. They came to me and they told me about this, and I said, this is tremendous. This is what I've said for years. If we're going to take back freedom, we have one opportunity to keep it peaceful, and that is the enforcement of state sovereignty by our sheriffs and by our state and county legislatures. We can keep this movement peaceful, my dear friends. We can. You have to have them on board, though. You have to have some of them. You have to have some sheriffs. And so they said, we want all of that to happen in Navajo County in Arizona, and we want you to come there and run for sheriff. And I said yes. My wife said no. This is one time I'm going to be the boss. We're moving. And it's 3 hours from where I live now. It's you've heard the song Standing on the Corner in Winslow, Arizona? Yeah. Winslow, Arizona is in Navajo County. I will be the sheriff of Winslow, Arizona. Okay? The election is in 2016. I want you to carefully, prayerfully consider moving there with me. And I'm serious. You want to live in a free county? You want to live by constitutional law? You want to not be worried about federal government coming in and ruining your lives and families and hauling you off at midnight? Come live with us there. We're going to do this. We're going to make it a constitutional county and show everybody the blueprint for freedom. And there's a lot more people running for other offices than me. I just said I'd run for sheriff. We're going to give this one more try. The election is in 2016. I'm going to be moving there in spring of 2015 so I can start getting ready for this. You have about a year and a half to decide. Okay? And I'm dead serious about this. If I can move there, so can you. Okay? Especially retirees. Let's do it. I'm tired of this. I don't know what else to do. We've got to do something. We've got to do more. And I don't know if a lot of you knew this because the media didn't pick up on this. I was at the Bundy Ranch. There were two things that I was really impressed with. One was that the Bundys are some of the best people I've ever met in my life. And especially Mrs. Bundy, Carol Bundy, Cliven's wife. What a wonderful, true patriot mother and daughter and lady of America. That's this wonderful lady. But the other two things that really got to me were, one, the federal government established a corral, not for the cattle. Well, they did that too, but they established another corral for you. And you could only do free speech if you were in that corral. And if you weren't doing it in the corral, they hauled you off to jail. And so when I went up there, I told my wife, I said, man, I got to get in that corral. She goes, don't do anything stupid. Then I said, I'm going to tear that corral down. I don't care what they do to me. Yeah. So all the way there, my wife has my other kids calling me and said, Dad, don't do anything stupid. I said, I'm not. I'm just going to tear down the corral. Okay? Dang, I never got the chance. But we don't go in any corrals. Not from anybody. And they try to do the same with the Second Amendment. But another thing happened. When the situation got the most tense, and the order to kill innocent, unarmed men and women was given by the federal government. And it was looking like it was going to happen, that people were going to be killed that day. And another civil war possibly starting there at Bunkerville, Nevada. A deputy sheriff saw this about to happen, and he ran over into the middle, and he put himself in the way, and he put himself between the protesters and the BLM and their hired hitman, their hired murderers. And he stopped it. His name was Deputy Tom Roberts of Clark County Sheriff's Office. He stopped it. He stood in the way and he told the BLM to leave. And we have a great example of a true lawman defending, protecting, and serving that happened that day. The story is in the book, Are You a David? It's the tale of two sheriffs. What sheriff do you want in your community? Do you want the sheriff of Clark County who said, the BLM and the federal government could come in my county and do whatever they want? Or do you want the sheriff in Nye County, Nevada, just a county away, who told the BLM, you're not taking Wayne Haig's cattle. You're not taking cattle. You'll take cattle over my dead body. And they told, you know what they told Sheriff DeMeo? They said, we're going to get our SWAT team and come back. And he said, good, I got one too. So my dear friends, let's keep this movement peaceful. Let's get our sheriffs involved, and let's make this country free again. I promise you, we still have peaceful options. We still have a way to keep this peaceful and regain our Constitution and freedom in America. I love all of you, and I'm thankful that you're here, and I'm thankful that I got to come. It almost didn't happen, but I'm so glad I came. I thank all of you for the work that you've done here. This is still America. We have options available to us if you have the courage to implement them. Are you a David? Let's do it. Thank you so much. God bless you.